Thank you, Dale. This actually leads nicely into my discussion because I actually didn't focus on teachers' attitudes. I focused on how teachers used technology when they were designing their lesson plans for their math methods course. And we are actually an alternate route to certification, if you will. We are a career switcher program. So all of our students have a bachelor's in a degree in a field other than elementary education. And our range of ages is anywhere from 24 to 65 in terms of the people that we have going back to become classroom teachers. We have people who were successful lawyers making 6-7-figure salaries and decided they wanted to give it all up and become classroom teachers. We've had engineers and the like. So I think this will help build nicely on some of the work that Dale did. And so as we look at pre-service teachers, it's pretty common that in their methods courses they're writing and implementing lesson plans. It's a pretty standard feature of math methods courses, but we don't always know how they're going to use technology, if at all. So we require in our institution that one of their 3 lesson plans has to integrate technology in some fashion, and that word integration has some value to it. But we don't know how they choose it. Why are they making the decisions that they do? So I wanted to look at the different factors related to the tasks. So what were the teachers actually doing with the technology? And this is one framework that really guided my dissertation, looking at task-related variables in student learning. So how a classroom teacher sets up a task and then how that impacts student learning. And so I focused on that second rectangle, the mathematical task was set up by the teacher in the classroom, the task features and the cognitive demands. That was really guiding this study. So these were my 2 research questions, and the first one was just I wanted to know what did they identify in terms of technology. I think that's just a great starting point. And then the second, and I thought this was more important, how then do they use the technology in their lesson plans? So those you can keep in the back of your mind as we go through this. So as I was reading the literature, there actually has not been a whole lot done in terms of how teachers integrate technology in their lesson plans. Attitudes is definitely one that pops up a lot, but not how they actually write a math lesson plan using technology. So I found a few studies. Kurtz, Middleton, and Yannick talked about only 2 pre-service teachers in case study format, and one was elementary, one was secondary. And in this study, however, they weren't planning for instruction. They were just going through your basic technology course in education, looking at tools and evaluating them, which is common in many programs. The second study looked at pre-service teachers who were evaluating commercial software and what kinds of things were they looking for when they were evaluating technology. But once again, they weren't planning for instruction. The third one has to do with secondary teachers and how they actually implemented technology and what the roles were. You know, who was in charge? Was it technology or the teacher? And their study was really interesting because there were a number of instances where the technology was in charge and the teacher was second, because the teacher's comfort level or experience was not as high as we would hope, so they did basically with the technology. If they pulled up a lesson plan that integrated technology, they followed it word for word, no altering, no looking for, ooh, could this be done in a better way? So this was a qualitative study, and the 2 main documents were their actual lesson plans, and I also developed a reflective document which is in your packet in the back. And it was a way of getting them to explain how and why they were using technology, because we can read a lesson plan and we can make assumptions on how teachers view technology, but unless you explicitly ask them why they're doing something. And one thing I made very clear in this is that this would not be shared with their cooperating teacher, because there are a few questions that ask, and you'll note in your packet, if you didn't have your cooperating teacher there, what would you have done differently? Because we found that the cooperating teacher can be a help or a hindrance. And so I wanted them to be real honest with me and know that their responses would not be shared with their cooperating teacher, who would be evaluating them in their future student teaching. So we had a total of 35 participants, and this was from our professional development schools. How many of you are familiar with professional development schools? Okay, so the bulk of them were there. The rest were placed at a partner school, which is not as intensive, so to speak, as a professional development school, but does still offer some worthy experiences. Our program has moved to only placing students in PDS schools now, which has been a real benefit to our student teachers. And we had 21 in the PDS section and then 14 in the partner school section. So as I said, these were the two main documents. The lesson plan format is just your traditional lesson plan as determined by the College of Education. And I believe there's a copy in the packet as well. So because of their schedules, the first section met bi-weekly, so every other week for about 3 hours or so for their math methods course. And then the second section met weekly in the evenings. And the instructor for both sections introduced some technology tools, talked about some of the pros and cons, and then, as I mentioned earlier, each pre-service teacher was required to write 3 lesson plans, teach them, reflect on them. One of them had to use technology. And so the instructor allowed me to attach this reflective document to their lesson plan as part of the requirement. And then that was due by the end of the semester. So just to get a sense of where everybody was, this was done in a school in Northern Virginia in a public school setting. All 35 teachers were in a major public school setting. And they just answered what kinds of things were available to them. Some of them said they had limited working technology in the building. Others said they might have 3 or 4 computers in the classroom. They might have a smart board in the room or available for checkout, laptops available, or computer labs available. And I thought that was really important because we can't negate the access issue. Because some of them would write in their reflection document, well, the computer lab wasn't available today, I was going to teach this lesson, so here's how I overcame that. So this gives you, and this is also in your packet, but this gives you a sense of what technology they use. Now you'll notice that of the 35, 6 of them did not use technology. And some of those were due to their cooperating teacher would not let them teach a lesson with technology. So we had to find ways to accommodate them, but when they wrote their lesson plan, they did not. And you'll notice that the smart board and Illuminations and LLVM are 2 highly recognized sources in math education for pre-K-12 resources for technology. Those are probably 2 of the best. So we've got 19 of the 35 using familiar, at least in math education, sources. And then we've got some other internet-based tools, a calculator. And then one teacher just kind of used the cell phone as a manipulative and just said, oh, I'm using this as technology. So that's why it starred. So then I really wanted to focus on how do teachers actually use the technology. And when I coded the reflective documents and lesson plans, there were 4 major ways. And these may or may not be surprising. Almost 2/3 use it as a display mechanism. How many of you were here for the luncheon today? What did he say about PowerPoint? Absolute power corrupts, absolute PowerPoint corrupts absolutely. But this is what a lot of the teachers felt comfortable with, kind of like I'm sitting up here, the smart board or the LCD projector was up here, they were in control. One person used productivity, which I'll show you in a moment. A few people review and practice, which is what many people think of tools for math as being review and practice. And then student exploration, and I want to just take some time to explain what each of those means. So this was an example of one of the teachers who used technology in the display method. So they developed a slideshow for Smartboard, which if you've ever developed anything for Smartboard, the slideshows are very similar in terms of PowerPoint. So that gives you a sense. So she typed up this lesson and basically created slides so that she could just go through them. And she was using Magic Mr. 1 for equivalent fractions. So the whole idea of multiplying by 1 to get an equivalent fraction. And so she describes what each slide does and how it works, very procedurally. And then the second teacher used productivity. And I'm not going to link to this because wireless is iffy in this room, but this is basically a tool where you can enter data and it generates a bar graph for you. So productivity, it's doing something for you. The student would just use some data that the students provided, create their bar graph, and then the lesson had to deal with different questions around the graphs that they created. The third example was a 5th grade lesson for review and practice. So this is very much a procedural lesson where the students were using the website. They all had laptops in the classroom that they checked out, and the students were practicing divisibility rules using the website. Once again, I won't go to it. There should be a screenshot in your packet, but it's very much you put in the number, something is given to you. And then finally, the fourth kind was student exploration, and if I had to rank these on a continuum, this would be the highest level of technology integration, where the students were using the geometric solids tool, which is a tool that allows students to manipulate three-dimensional figures of cones, rectangular prisms, triangular pyramids, and such, and analyze the shapes based on different properties. And so this teacher actually had the students make some predictions. The students wrote down what they found in common among some of the solids, what made them different. So rather than just memorizing a set of rules, a rectangular prism is this, a cone is this, the students were actually coming up with the rules, and then as a class and the teacher, they were testing those rules to see how and why they worked. So anytime we have research, there's always somebody's going to ask, well, what were some limitations? And so I admit 35 is not a huge sample size, but since this was more of a qualitative, I wasn't as concerned with that. And we're not always concerned with external generalizability in qualitative. However, having repeated similar studies with other populations, this is found to be true in several populations that I've worked with. And researcher bias, the good thing about this was I was not the instructor for each of these, so I didn't really have a stake in it other than I needed to get my dissertation done. So I have studied my own students. How many of us have done that where we've collected data from our own students? I know our IRB board is really kind of cracking down on that because they're concerned about that potential conflict of interest. So I was fortunate that these were not my own students and that I could kind of just step back and see where the data fell. Three areas that I think we need to focus on as a community of teacher educators, as Division K. We often ask our pre-service teachers to write a lesson plan, but we don't ask them to really think about what they're writing. We give them a template, say, here, write a lesson plan, but when they get into their own classrooms, they're not going to be writing lesson plans every day. So kind of encouraging them to be reflective about their practice is so important. The second is we also need to be engaging our pre-service teachers in activities in which they're looking at technology, not just for drill and kill, but some more conceptual understanding, particularly in math. There are some wonderful tools out there. As I tell my pre-service teachers, you just need to be good consumers, because just because it's available, it's just like a textbook, it's a tool. Just because it's there does not mean it's good or bad. And the third issue is locus of control. Who has control? In a number of the display lesson plans, it was very evident that that pre-service teacher had to be up in the front, had to be in control, because they felt uncomfortable letting the students go off to websites or tools. They didn't feel comfortable walking around the room seeing what everybody was doing. Whereas, as you saw in the last example, the students were really in charge of their learning and were testing each other's hypotheses with that tool. So those are three issues that I continue to attend to when I'm developing my courses. And we just switched to a model of, we have a 1-credit technology course for math teachers, which is a required course that they take while they're taking the methods course, so they can really develop their knowledge of technology and what's good technology and what's bad technology for math specifically, because we found sometimes those gen ed technology courses, they weren't really getting deep into math. And so I always love to have cartoons when I teach, so I thought I'd share this one with you. And there's some cavemen doing some formulas, and it says, but we just don't have the technology to carry it out. And I think that really relates well to my pre-service teachers. They may or may not have the technology, it's how are they using it. So, thank you.
Thank you, Grace. And next we have the team